Yeah,
Wow.
so along with everyone else who played on the live stream sued Stones, and we settled out of court. I did not settle because the settlement was bullshit, and they wanted us to never talk about it again. I refused to do that. And then Mike sued me and Joey and Doug and ESPN and everybody and their dog. And then I filed an anti-slap, and he dropped his case the second I filed the anti-slap because he didn't want discovery.
All right, it's time for discovery to see what else is going on in your world, Veronica, because apparently it's quite a lot. I've got that you're a DJ, that you're in beauty competitions, that you're also talking talks with other people about preventative measures to stop cheating and out scumbags. I don't know if outing scumbags is on your list. Maybe I'm getting things confused. But doing things to stop cheating, which I'm a fan of. I hope. To be fair, if there is a scandal, I hope it's as fucking stupid as this Mike Postle thing. This is really
Yeah, in hindsight, it sounds like ridiculous, right? I'm calling this second edition. I don't know if you're going to air them both together, but I'm calling this Jungle After Dark because for me, it's like close to my bedtime because I'm an old lady. It's 8:30 p.m.
It's close to my bedtime too. It's like 1:30 p.m. Which is past my bedtime, actually. My bedtime was roughly 6 a.m. or so, as of lately. But I'm deciding to stay awake, which I don't think I recommend, unfortunately. But yeah, I guess it's after bedtime.
Are you playing poker out there? Or are you just visiting? Or what are you doing? Now I'm going to interview you.
Yeah, okay, so I'm playing poker here. One of the topics we do discuss here is sleep and how important it is, which this is one where I really would prefer not to sleep, I think, but yeah, I'm not taking my own advice, but at the same time, the games run until like 5 fucking a.m., and I'm just thinking, when am I supposed to sleep exactly? It's not 5 a.m., which is not the right time to sleep, by the way. But yeah, so there's poker out here. Australia is one of the healthiest markets for poker that I've ever seen. I really think it's pretty good, actually.
What's that definition? What's the healthy definition?
There's not very much cheating. I think there's still a decent amount of slow paying and that kind of thing. I've yet to hear too many cases of cheating here. And then there's quite a few reasonably high stakes games. And yeah, just haven't heard too much crap going on. High stakes meaning like 5,100 plus. There's quite a few of those in the US, but it seems like pros have a little bit more access to get in. So, and it's a bit more, got a bit of a positive interpretation as well on poker. That's my understanding.
Okay. I'm always curious what like the motivation is for cheating when you could put in as much effort into trying to get better, or maybe it's not just about winning and getting better. Maybe it's like some sort of internal drive, some sort of satisfaction. Like Mike Postle used to like, what is that? Duper's delight. He would like laugh after he would win. So maybe it's a psychological thing that I don't understand.
It feels like, so there is one actually, by the way, there is one. So, you know, I've learned this myself and I find it funny. So there, well, I would think at least most of the cheaters were in it for the money, but it turns out that I'm kind of wrong. And there's some truth to what's going on. It looked like Mike had actually won a lot of money, though. I wonder if he was able to get a bit of it back. It seems like some cheaters do make lots of money, but as it turns out, that con artists in general do not make a lot of money. I forget where I read this. They actually make like kind of not so great salaries, but they're actually in it for the thrill of the game. That's the underlying factor going on, is that they're not in it to make money. They're in it to fucking just.
The con is the pot, right? They're winning the pot, and the pot is the con. They've won. It's like the next layer. They've like manipulated the situation for themselves, maybe.
Yeah, something
I love how
like
you
that.
find so much of what I say funny, Jungle.
Well, just the whole idea of con artists, like, just really putting loads of effort in to get like a con through and not actually make any money is funny to me. But I mean, it's not so funny when. Huh?
they're probably not. They're probably not like starting out in any logical, like with any logical steps, right? Like, I want to get money. What is my way there? And everything along that path has gone wrong. Every decision on the decision tree has been made incorrectly. I mean, and it's probably like some narcissism in there where they. I remember like Justin Caritas would think that what he just told me was just like taken as truth, as gospel, and I was not supposed to be actually thinking about what he said, and that like he was shocked that I didn't just believe him at face value. So there's might be some narcissism there where they believe that they're smarter than everyone else and they've duped everybody so easily.
I would have thought that this one I don't know about, but I would have thought the origins of being a scumbag are just like sucking it, like actually winning the real way. That's what I thought, right. To be honest. That's definitely what I thought when I was younger. Now I don't really know, but I mean, like, why would you? Well, you said it yourself. Why would you go through all this effort to like get money the shitty way when you could just like do the real way if you're so good, right? Like, if you're really smarter than everyone else, shouldn't you just win straight up? Like, why would you go the fucking way where you backstab everybody or whatever it is?
Right. And I was thinking, like, if we're talking about Postle, I would say that it would involve a lot of low IQ short-term planning. Like, there's no way you think that you can do this for the next 10 years. You're just thinking day by day at this point, because especially as it got worse and worse, I think he got more and more comfortable with the cheating as it went along.
Well, I do think that's a bit inevitable, right? Because if you just like don't get caught ever, it's really hard to keep having that discipline. I mean, it's true with other things as well. Like, if you don't need discipline, it's really hard to like remind yourself, especially if you're a fucking cheater who's not exactly like predicated, whose existence isn't predicated on sheer discipline. It's more predicated on doing things the cheap way, right? So it's inevitable that they're gonna like take higher shots or whatever. It's like they view it as a winning strategy. Oh, cheating is now a successful thing. Like, this seems clear to me that at some point someone who cheats is gonna get caught. Like, there's just no way that whatever's like, they're gonna keep going for more ridiculous things and they're gonna go for bigger things because of course they are. It's now their mind's confirmed it as a winning strategy. It just has to fail.
Yeah, I also think that there is, at least this is anecdotal, but it feels like you have to have, again, this low IQ strategy. You have to have a lack of empathy. Your blind side is your lack of ability to see how people are perceiving you and your actions. Like, it was always funny to me that they were doing things that I was like, this is obviously cheating, like, right? Like, everyone is saying that this is weird. And I think not enough people watched Stones live to give a shit when it was peak cheating. But yeah, like, I think that, like, especially in my conversation with Justin, because at the time I did not think that Justin was involved, but clearly he was. But at the time I thought like, looking back, he did not have the ability to see how other people were perceiving the situation, because I think they were just so used to getting away with it and they just got in over their heads, maybe.
Sure. I can believe this. I don't really know. It's funny to diagnose the psychology and all the mental flaws of the cheater, a serial cheater. But certainly it looks like the Mike Postle scam was did not have a whole lot of like high level virtues and intelligence going on. I think this is 100% true. Certainly lack of empathy, lack of understanding how people feel, and lack of like realizing how fucking ridiculous this was. I'm like tempted to start watching the videos now because I'm like, is this really that obvious?
You should. I'll just send you like the top 10 hands that are like the most obvious, and you'll be like, what the fuck? This happened for 18 months.
Okay, yeah, something seems amiss. Usually, yeah, at some point there's usually something really wildly off for cheating. You can find it out. Most of them aren't so fantastic from my experience of running into that. but depends, of course, if they're quite smart.
I-
It's never a problem.
I will say that I think that the reason this went on as long as it did is because there was internal help, right? Had there been a competent floor manager who was not involved and maybe someone in tech was helping Mike, because someone was helping Mike. Mike wasn't doing this alone. So if there was someone competent running it, would have maybe lasted a few weeks. And then they would have been like, what the fuck are you guys doing? Like, you're fired. You're off the show. But because it was an internal job, that's what I think made it last longer. And then the internal job was doing a really shitty job of keeping it on the DL.
You gave me a funny idea of like imagining two like villains and they're in cahoots and just like some fucking goofy guys. They got like a scheme going on. That's what I imagined.
Just turn it into a comedy show.
It is from like a super high perspective, but it's unfortunate everyone got screwed. Let's practice the empathy that villains don't have. Also, that I think would be useful for the podcast, and not well, hopefully there should be some kind of lawsuit or something. I hope
there was. There were many. Yeah, so along with everyone else who played on the live stream, sued Stones. And we settled out of court. I did not settle because the settlement was bullshit. And they wanted us to never talk about it again. I refused to do that. And then Mike sued me and Joey and Doug and ESPN and everybody and their dog. And then I filed an anti-slap. And he dropped his case the second I filed the anti-slap because he didn't want discovery. And then now he owes me legal fees, and he's accumulating interest on those fees. So he owes me about $50,000 right now, I think, maybe less.
For legal fees?
Yeah. So, well, that's the interest included, right? I think I was awarded like over $30,000 for my legal fees. I can't remember the numbers offhand because it was a while ago. And then they've been accumulating interest. And I have a lien on his winnings in like 3 states where he plays. But it's incredibly hard to catch him. So I probably will never see that money. It's actually all going to go back to Bill Perkins because Bill Perkins helped me with my legal fees.
Oh, that's really nice of him. I had no idea any of this was going on.
Yeah, we were supposed to go into discovery. That's why he wanted to do it. But then as soon as Mike heard about it, he dropped the case and he didn't want to move forward.
This guy just seems like better and better the more I hear about it. It's so much like, what the fuck? Yeah, it just seems like only classy decisions from this guy. Okay, well, yeah. I guess I don't know.
The biggest frustration with all of this is that the only people who really made money or came out ahead were the lawyers. Like, the lawyers just scooped up all the money. I just hated this entire process in hindsight.
Well, the lawyers didn't seem to do anything wrong. That's unfortunate. At least we got some laughs in, I guess. I'm sorry that Mike Postle screwed you and Bill out of a lot of money and a lot of other people. But I'm sure it doesn't sound like this guy's got a great life, if I had to guess. It doesn't seem like... Usually it's not personal. A cheater's going to cheat. What role are you taking in regards to... Are you taking any role, actually, in regards to preventative measures in the future or helping with anti-cheating measures of sorts?
Well, I was trying to get in that world because I am in the world of analytics, but it's healthcare analytics because my undergrad's in nursing, so it just makes sense. But I was trying to get a job on DraftKings for a little while, and it was for their poker risk analytics because apparently at the time they were looking to open up a poker site. And I don't know if that's happened since. I haven't heard anything about it, but they were going to have like a online poker gaming site through DraftKings. And they were looking for people who worked in analytics and understood poker and were able to identify variables involved in poker and like variables involved in cheating within poker and like how we would identify that. It was interesting because I had to kind of come up with, I think I told you about this last time, I had to come up with like my own I used the Jack 4 data, all the hands that she played, and I did an analysis on that because they didn't even have a database established. Like they didn't know what to use as a database, like what markers to track. And so I kind of had to come up with my own thing. So I think like I'd be highly interested in doing some sort of, not like on the ground with like, with like binoculars, in the ceiling of the casino or anything like that, and like looking at signals, which I thought was funny because that's all the DOJ was interested in when I spoke with them about the Mike Postle stuff, but more like looking at large numbers, large data sets and tracking outliers and seeing potential cheating in the data, identifying it that way, and not necessarily like chasing a guy into the bathroom to see if he has a device on him.
Is that
well? I mean,
the DOJ was into that stuff, finding the devices on people.
Jungle, I can't even tell you the questions that the DOJ asked me because I have a feeling you're gonna laugh so hard you're gonna fall on the ground.
All right, well, they
were like,
we're gonna have to investigate.
So, was he signaling anybody? And I'm like, no, he was on his device getting the live stream on his phone from the tech people and Justin Caritas. And they were like, yeah, whatever, but was he signaling anybody? Was he counting cards? And I was just like, so they came in and they were like, we don't know anything about poker. We just want to let you know. And we do think there's probably a good chance he cheated, but we don't know anything about it. And I was like, oh, great. This is going to go nowhere. There's no incentive to close down Citrus Heights casino, Stone's Casino, right? It would kill all these jobs and taxes, and there's no incentive there. So,
well, that doesn't seem
if it's
right.
An internal,
huh?
Well, I mean, like you have to look at where incentives are, right? Well, how everything functions in society. Like the society is one thing that like most of us probably grapple with as an adult is like unfairness in society, unfairness in how money is distributed, unfairness in like everything. Sure. Like, and so I don't think that there was much incentive for the DOJ to find that there was electronic cheating with someone who was working for Stones, which would shut down a casino. And then like everybody loses jobs. And then the Citrus Heights, California loses like this big tax nest egg. So I don't think they were incentivized to find anything. Plus this guy didn't cheat the casino. He cheated us. He cheated the people who came to the casino. So I think the DOJ is more interested in finding people who cheat the casino.
Oh, I was thinking that, what would have been the right thing to do is have the casino basically be responsible for what happened and just pay you and the other people who played. I've thought that, and you don't really want to close the casino unless they're really corrupt themselves. It's just the two people, right? I mean, this one guy's not even associated with the casino. And then, so they pay the whatever, they pay the price. Like, why? It's basically their fault.
They kind of did when we sued.
Authority. Oh, okay.
Yeah, they kind of did when we sued, but the thing is, like, there's no world where they can take any sort of responsibility because that would just instantly shut them down, right? So they have to deny. Like, I get why they're denying it. And I get that they probably were blindsided by the fact that their employee was cheating, helping a guy cheat. So, and they probably wanted to save face and keep the casino open. And I get that. I wouldn't want them to be closed down, but, that is just the law in California. They would be closed down if it was electronic cheating by an internal source.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Well, looks like the problems. There's a lot of problems going on here. Now the problem seems to be with that stupid law that exists for some reason.
Yeah, but like cheating, like I don't know with like live poker, besides home games, you're probably always going to run into something going on, but especially if you're in LA. No, I'm just kidding. But they're like the casinos and cheating, like I honestly wouldn't be super interested in that. I would be more interested in like looking at online gaming and cheating online. I don't know how good I'd be at it because I'm in healthcare, but
Well, you could try it. Speaking of which, we'll get to healthcare in a second, but it feels like a basic conversation about poker would have caught the cheater in the first place if someone had just decided, dude, how'd you know how to fold there with like this empty nuts? And it seemed like that would have revealed Mike Postle.
okay.
Just bro, I just had to read,
Jungle.
bro.
I'm going to send you 2 videos, Jungle. Promise me, pinky swear me right now that you will watch them and get back to me. And I just know that the interview that I send you with Mike Postle and Justin Caritas, you will hysterically laugh. It'll be a comedy session for you based off of your reaction, everything I say about this thing.
How long are they? If they're not so long,
so the interview. Okay, the interview with Mike Postle and Justin Caritas is 30 minutes, but you don't have to watch the whole thing. You just have to watch him explain one hand, and you'll be like, "Oh my god!" And then I'll send you like his top. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it just looks like a little bit of tapping the glass. It's just like, hey, how did you do this? Really kind of exposed it straight away. It doesn't look like you did some super sleuthing.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I came to the conclusion, because he was playing in Veronica and Friends every month. I hosted a really big game, and he would come and meet us for dinner, and sometimes he would show up early and I'd be there, and we would start eating and we would hang out and talk. And I was like, so like that hand last time I saw you was crazy, right? Like, what were you thinking? Oh man, yeah. Yeah, I just had to read. Like, it was always just this low IQ, like, yeah, man, I'm just like so good, kind of shit. So it's awesome. I mean, like, it's really portrayed in all the interviews that he's done.
It's a great response, actually. I might have to steal that. Let's find your response.
Yeah, man, I had to read.
I'm completely stoned. All right. And isn't the casino called something like Stone something?
Stones, yeah, Stones Casino, and it was Stones Live. And like, it made sense because like Live the bike was growing. And we never got it. Like, he never promoted anything. And we had like Matt Berkey and Marley coming to the game, and he barely promoted it. He didn't want any eyes on it because he knew it was getting ridiculous. Not Mike, but Justin Caritas.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, let's talk about the healthcare system a bit.
Okay.
But thank you for giving me a new approach to when people ask me out to try this. Okay, so the healthcare system and data. Have you tried looking at data to catch cheaters in poker? If not, let's talk about like what you do in healthcare. I would think that healthcare has got some problems.
Yeah, healthcare has some problems. Have I tried? Yeah. I mean, like, yeah, I tried with the Robbie stuff, with the Postle stuff.
Oh yeah.
I think like you're so tired, Jungle. You just need to sleep. I think with poker, it might, and it's like, it seems so weird to say, but it's like, it might be as easy as an outlier. Like, it might be as easy as seeing the average big blinds per session for that sort of game. And then if you have a consistent outlier, like, it just might be that. I'm not sure. I mean, that's like a very unsophisticated answer, but I think sometimes the most simple answer might be the best solution, I guess. Because that's what Mike was. Mike was just like this chronic outlier. And then the other variables, like I was saying, that the outlier without the other variables, like studying and being intelligent when you talk, and like knowing like cognitively walking through the hand, because you don't have to think about a hand when you already know all the cards, right? You're not having to like have this thoughtful process. You're just like, oh yeah, I'll just shove here if he just checks. Like, I think he didn't have to work as hard to get to win the hands. And so, anyway, I feel like I'm going in circles with these answers.
Right. Oh, well, let's talk about healthcare then. So,
okay, let's talk about healthcare.
In what way do you use data to detect something's amiss? Is this for giving insurance or something? Because I heard that the healthcare system is a bit fucked up in the US.
So I think I work for a not-for-profit, and we have almost 4 hospitals, and I run all of the inpatient data because my background is in inpatient nursing and trauma, emergency, and inpatient nursing. I think the government body, I'm going to be very vague because people don't know all the acronyms and stuff, but the government body will say, okay, based off of these diagnostic codes, your patients should be staying 3.5 days. And so we will take our population, and so it'll be a geometric mean length of stay recommended by the government. And we will take our population and say, okay, 40% of our patients that have this diagnostic code are staying above the mean length of stay recommended. And so we'll have harder times getting reimbursements for that. And so then we have to dive deeper into the data and say, what are the other variables contributing to these patients staying longer than the geometric mean length of stay? And what can we do to change that? I know previously we talked about this. You seem to have dived into my Twitter, but I think in healthcare, especially, now I don't think this is the same in tech. I think tech, there's a lot of really good data science being done. But in healthcare, I think we're not that sophisticated yet. I don't have any of my customers asking me to do any regression. They're I just want the average. I want to know the percentage of the population. And so it is hard for me or anyone on my team to do really sophisticated data analysis if our customers don't understand it and if our customers aren't going to do anything with it. And so I feel healthcare is still in the early stages of data science where we have a lot of data and it isn't that clean. We have to clean it because people mess up data all the time in the system, but and then which is a part of data science, cleaning data. But then we're pulling it, but then I feel there's not enough action items being taken for this data, if that makes sense. So we're at the tail end of okay, we're almost there. We're going to make decisions based off of this. We're going to do something with this. We're going to do predictive modeling, hopefully one day. We do have some predictive modeling, but it's underutilized.
Can you give some examples of some kind of extremity in the data and what kind of action you might take? Because it seems also quite complicated for someone to do something about it.
That's another problem, right? So if there are 25 variables involved in a patient's stay being past their geometric mean length of stay recommendation, we have to then say, how can we identify the main ones? And every patient is so unique. It's hard to figure out. And I just had a meeting today with chief medical officers and showing them the data. And they were just well, can you come back after you've shown us ones with diabetes and shown us other comorbidities? And then, we need to dive deeper into the charts and see why they're staying so long. And there's just a lot of variables, very complex stuff. I will tell you overall, big things I see is, and everybody already knows this, inactivity, diabetes, obesity, all of this stuff just leads to a life of horrible outcomes. That's all I can say. Mobility, if you can just keep your mobility up and your weight down, your life is going to be 10 times better. And I mean, just meeting with surgeons and they're just yeah, they all have diabetes. Yeah, they all have obesity. Yeah, they're here because of that. Those are the centerpieces to a dining room table full of mess. So
went to med school to figure out, oh yeah, but they all got obesity, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, well, what are you going to do about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually thinking that, I mean, in fitness, there's kind of a bit of a thing that happens to be the case as well. Fitness is quite complicated. As it turns out, or at least it's more complicated than it looks. It's all like, oh, you got to do your muscle, your workouts properly. I mean, I kind of understand most of what's going on now, but it looked to me that as though there were some overall diagnoses of sorts that could help things in general, like uniformly across the board, like sprints and also some heavy lifting and that kind of thing. And so I thought, okay, well, maybe healthcare is a bit of the same way, where it's like, don't get really fat and maybe do some exercise.
So apparently, like 8% of adults in America weightlift. And like that is
Really?
a key thing to insulin resistance. Like you can become easily insulin resistant if you don't have good muscle mass and you're not weightlifting. And then you lose mobility and then it just snowballs, right?
Yeah, okay. I didn't know about that. I thought it was higher than that for sure. I have a question. Is it 8% of all adults, or what percent of those are like the ones in,
So,
the healthy range?
yeah. So, like, forgive me for not pulling this data myself. I follow like a couple fitness gurus who are like super data savvy. And I watched one of their videos and they were like, yeah, only 8% of adults are weightlifting. And then it was just talking about like how 50% of adults in America don't even exercise at all. Like they're not doing anything. So it kind of was derived from that. So I could potentially find the exact amount. It might be 8%, but it sounds pretty accurate. Like I don't know very many people in my office my age who are weightlifting. Like I'm in my late 40s and yeah,
Well,
I think it's a rare thing.
Sure. I mean, I kind of
I'm
get
an old
it.
lady.
Well, I kind of get it if someone's like in their old age, but it might even be more important when you're older. I don't know.
You should be doing it more when you're older. You should never stop weightlifting. Yeah.
Oh, so you're weightlifting, I'm guessing. You're one of the 8%.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I lift weights. Oh, yeah. I run. I'm a little chubby right now because, I've been eating a good meals every day, but I don't want to starve myself like I used to in my 20s and 30s. But yeah, I'm always weightlifting. I'm always running. Yeah. I go sprinting sometimes. Yeah. I think it's super important.
Speaking of which, I do all the above too. I actually work out like 5+ times a week. I don't even count like martial arts workouts because they're quite easy. But I mean, if you count those, it's more than 5 times, but like 5 legit fucking workouts. Like hard
nice.
sprints.
Yeah.
Actually,
I'm almost there. I'm not, when I was in my 20s, I was 2 times a day. I was hardcore. So
that's a lot.
Yeah, but yeah. I try to get 4 or 5 times a week. Yeah.
So I have a question. The question is just basically, I mean, it's almost the same question. Like the age range of something like 18, 17 to like 40, where it's, or whatever age it is. I don't really know. It might be higher. I don't know. But the range where like you really want to be attractive and blah, blah, blah. Is it still only 8%? I just find that very surprising. I know it's a low number, but I would have thought it's at least like double that.
So that's interesting because I agree with you that like attractiveness is very important. Like I think it's more. I mean, as a feminist, I still want to live in a reality right? Like I don't want to be like, well, size doesn't matter because it clearly does. Like if you want to be attractive, you have to work out. You should be working out. But I think a lot of people, I'm curious, like, if that's maybe older adults that are not working out as much, but I think a lot of people are just like dieting too. Like, I know a lot of people who diet but don't work out.
Really? Diet's so much, like, it's harder, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. It's painfully hard to just diet and not work out. Do you want me to do a fact check for myself?
Okay, I can do it real fast. If you can do it fast.
Of Americans who lift weights. Percentage of adult Americans. Okay, so this one says 30%. That's 2018. But you know what? I wonder if they were quoting like older ages. Okay, I'm wrong. It was about 30%.
Oh, okay. It's 30%. That makes more sense to me.
So
Although
my bad.
I
My
imagine
bad.
a lot of those percent are a bit more casual, and that sort of thing is my personal guess.
Now
Right, well,
I
30%.
feel embarrassed that I quoted a fitness guru that I follow blindly. I blindly quoted them. But the most important point, ladies and gentlemen, listeners of the Jungle podcast, is that you check to see if you were wrong and then you accept that you were wrong and then you change, you update yourself. Don't be stagnant.
All right, guys, we're promoting changing your view if you're wrong on this podcast. That's one of we value that
it's
on the
freeing.
Case podcast.
Is that a place that you ever been? Have you ever been there in your life where you just like started being okay with being wrong and just feeling that freedom of just being like, okay, I'm wrong. And like, okay, I update what I know rather than just hanging on to beliefs rather than understanding facts.
Oh, I'm never wrong. No, they're kidding. I'm being worse. That's a joke. That's a joke.
You're such an American man.
I'm wrong all the time. I don't know who are these people that think I'm wrong all the time. Yeah, I think I'm cool at being wrong, especially when I claim to never be wrong on my own podcast. So I have to be at peace with that one. That one was, especially when you thought like maybe I was serious. It seemed based on your reaction, you thought like maybe this guy is like actually serious. It's yeah. So I'm we're at peace with that.
Okay.
Okay, so let's talk about something else. So are you into I have that you're also into the blockchain type stuff. You're a BI developer and into, I believe we talked about decision science a little bit in the past. I don't really know what that refers to.
Yeah, so I mentioned the first time we talked, and actually this is a better, transition to that because in my mind, like I'm always thinking about my customers and how I can get the data to them easier and have them understand it. And I think decision science is the tail end of data science and that you're using data to make decisions. And I just think that we all should be data-driven decision makers and not, I mean, there's going to be times where you're going to be intuitive for sure. And we talked about this last time that we would say like, when do you go with your feelings and when do you go with the data? And that's always hard, right? But I think decision science is the most important step, if not its own process from data science, the tail end of data science. And I just don't feel like we're using that enough.
I know I read in a book by Daniel Kahneman about thinking fast and slow. I'm very sure it was in this book, but he basically said, about your job in data and decision science, that it's hard, even when you present data to a lot of people, to get them to now act rationally for the sake of the decision science. You have to like shock them emotionally, to like shake them, not literally shake them, maybe literally shake them, but you have to create some kind of emotion in them to get them to change, or else it's not going to happen. Which sounds like that happens loads of times. It's just nothing fucking happens. Would you say that's accurate?
I feel like we could go in a lot of directions with this. Like I did read that book a long time ago, but it reminds me of like Wait, But Why? And Sapiens kind of went into this too, how we've evolved to be tribal groups, right? We're primates. And it's kind of why like sports is appealing or politics, where we can like share an idea and we don't know the person, but we know that we share that idea and we can like feel a part of this group. And I feel like a lot of decisions are made like with groupthink. And then I feel like we're not inherently used to making decisions that don't feel natural to us. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've provided data to people and they were like, no, this doesn't feel right. Like, this can't be right. Like, something's wrong with the data. And I'm like, well, the data's like pretty objective. And so I think people are used to just like making decisions based off of their anecdotal experience and like groupthink in some ways, like political parties. Like, it's weird to me that we can't say, like, I used to be Republican. And one of the things that started driving me away was like, wait, well, like, why can't I believe in environmental science? Like, why can't I be fiscally conservative and still say there is an environmental impact on this earth? And I was just like, well, why do I have to think like everybody else? Like, why can't we think independently about stuff? So I think like there's like psychological, social, evolutionary impacts on how we make decisions. And I think maybe data might be the bottom tier of how to make decisions. It's kind of like, I have a poker coach and like, obviously I know, Jungle, you're like way smarter at poker than I am. But like, sometimes when we run sims, I'm just like, huh? What do you mean I'm like betting 30% of the time with like king 4 off here? You know, like I just like, none of it seems intuitive to me, but I have to like stop my brain from like, I know you're like thinking, I'm just using a random hand as an example, but like, it's intuitive for me to play bad, you know, and so it's intuitive, I think, for a lot of people to make bad decisions. Does that make sense?
That you actually helped me understand their mindset a little bit, because in the solver land, I've actually had a bit of this going on myself, where it's like, holy fuck, is this really what's going on? And I thought to myself, well, maybe the solver is like not right, which actually is possible. The solver can like have bugs. That's the thing. And absolutely, I played against people such as very good poker players, such as Sauce123, and he would come up with like bizarrely strange conclusions. And me being the guy who's not 100% Sims, just completely fucking wrecked him when he came up with a really, really weird situation where he would start like calling pot-sized bets with like fucking queen high and no limit hold'em and no gut shot. And that was not working out very well at all. He was like, wait a second, maybe I'm wrong. So, I mean, if you look at things from that perspective, they're like not that insane, because you're kind of coming at them from this like weird angle of like knowledge from outer space and saying, hey, this is actually the truth, not what you led your whole life to believe. And now it makes sense that they're like, oh yeah, well, all my friends say this, and this is what my entire life has been happening. So what the fuck is this? I mean, it makes a bit more sense though.
I think the most extreme example of like coming to terms of what we're talking about is like someone who has been raised religious and then realizing at some point that there is no God, which I went through. And then it's like everything from your childhood, you're like, everything was a lie. Like, and then you have to readjust everything. I think it takes like 5 years anecdotally to like adjust to letting go of a lot of like the bullshit that you learned as a kid. Like,
well, I have something to say about that. So I actually went through a bit of a different transformation, and I came to the conclusion that almost everything in the ancient religions was taken out of context. The Old Testament's a little bit different. That's that one's a bit more controversial, but pretty much everything else, or a lot of other things, there's lots of bullshit actually, but the core messages of these things actually turns out to be very true, and there's loads of evidence for it to give yourself a little bit of a mind twist. And I had a couple crazy experiences where I like thought, well, maybe this is really what's going on, and the fucking people from like 5,000 years ago were actually right about a lot of things. And yeah, I mean, the biggest thing actually for me was that I'll throw a bit of a spice ball at you, but I realized that the actions and the philosophies of Christ, for example, if taken to their final extreme, actually would create a utopian world. And it wasn't just like he was preaching some arbitrary religion. This was like actually logically the steps towards utopia, but from the individual perspective. And that kind of blew my mind and made me think, okay, well, what about the other ones? So they're all kind of the same in a way.
Yeah, I would argue that like given what you're saying is true, your hypothesis is true, I would argue that none of the Christians currently in America, at least, are practicing that form of religion. Because I'm probably not as well read as people who like studied extensively. Like I gave up studying it. I went to a Lutheran university before I went into nursing, and I was in a Catholic school. So I like did a good amount of studying, which is kind of what led me to leave. But I don't agree with you. I think there are good things found within the Bible that definitely can correlate to a happy life, but I don't think overall it should be our life strategy. And I don't think that it's evidence of a God or a God of the first or second or the New Testament, which is a pretty despicable God.
Right. So there's a lot to unpack on that one. So I'm going to start with the concept of God is basically an anthropomorphization of the universe. If you look deep into it, it's just basically like applying human concepts or the human way of looking at things to just the whole way the universe works. And just like this is a more salient way to convince a huge percentage of the population to go along with things. That's my personal perspective, and that works. Actually, there's a genius dude named Vivek Nanda has said precisely this, that and if you read his book, it'll tell you something else. It'll be like quite a bit to handle. But he just says something like every animal will look at the universe, they'll understand God through their own like consciousness. The human will see God through like, imagine God as like a human or whatever, and a bull, imagine it like a bull, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I agree with you about the Christians in general. I think it's a little better than it looks, is my personal guess. I was a little bit biased and thought, okay, well, maybe these guys are, I started to have this idea of maybe trying to investigate and seeing how bad it really was, because definitely there's lots of positives as I read in history of things that really surprised me. And there's lots of bad shit too, to be fair. But anyway, what was I going to say?
But I would say if you're going to take the positive to represent the religion and then omit the negative, then are you having a true representation of that religion? But I understand you're talking about like a God, like it sounds like a universal kind of like deity that created all things or something like that, like a very vague description of one.
Well, it's not untrue if you consider God the universe. Like that is what happened. So, I will. I'm just saying that I think every atheist is an agnostic. We're just waiting for the evidence. So, well, I don't think the universe is evidence of a God. Sorry, I interrupted you. It's not. There's no such thing as something that defies the laws of physics. In that sense, there's no such God like that. That does not exist. I can tell you that. That cannot be how things work. And various philosophers have gone into that, and we'll explain that or whatever. So, the biggest thing is if you actually look at, and people get real hung up on the Old Testament and Christianity, all the fucking like retarded. I mean, excuse me. They get hung up on all these like specific assertions about what happened and blah blah blah, while missing this whole idea of like literally the message is be a good person and do things for the sake of the greater good. And if you take all the lessons of like precisely what Christ says, they're all logical. But if you take them from Hinduism or whatever, they are logical actually in the extreme to a point of like, it's unnatural to be this fucking inefficient with what you do. The real issue would be how to reconfigure yourself to becoming this productive of a member of society. That would be like quite a challenge. And the overall theme in the religious has nothing to do with hypocrisy or anything. It's totally anti that. And the people that follow that stuff are technically hypocrites and aren't really following the things that they say they follow. But it's also like an extremely high, how do you say, thing to follow. If you were to, in their purest form, these things should actually basically boil down to a philosophy, not a belief that is believed for no reason. At least like that I can 100% get behind. There is a point where you have to extend yourself and take a certain leap of faith for certain things, but it's not in the actual morals of the religion or whether it's good or evil. That's my understanding. If you really look, like a lot of things do make loads of sense, such as the practice of yoga and the practice of meditation and these kinds of things. There's reasons why these have existed for 5,000 years. And what a coincidence that finally science brought them somewhere in the 1900s to science and say, oh, actually, these things are really good for you. You should do for them. You should do them. Who would have thought? And I find that to be like a really, really striking coincidence that that's happened. It's not like, it's these people have been doing this for a really long time. It did actually work. Does that make sense?
Let me ask you a question. Yeah, okay. That makes sense. Let me ask you a question. What would a world or a universe look like given there is no God? Like, what would be the difference, you think?
The question of, in this case, the question would not be whether there's no God or not. It would be, my personal question is does the world, okay, so I personally asked this question to a lot of spiritual people, and I also wonder myself, this is really what it boils down to, is two things, actually. Does the good and the right behavior that we know consciously actually pay off in the long run? Is there a justice? Where the fuck is justice? I ask this question quite a bit to people, because if there is in effect a God. It's the same thing. It's just now we've called it something else. And another question that might even be more to the point is there actually, does their consciousness go on after death, and there's another life after that where we become responsible for whatever happened with ourselves in the previous lives, and now we have to like deal with it in later lives? That's the same question, just put in another way. It's like as if you were to write a mathematical formula and then rephrase it as something else. It's the same idea. We're just using different language. You see what I'm saying? Like I wouldn't phrase it in terms of like, is there God or not? Because it's just more of like, well, is there actually justice? Because like you could just call God everything, and like, does the good behavior, what is good in the first place? Like, does good actually create good?
Do you think that there is justice then? Like, my question is, would the world look any different if there was no God, given what you're telling me, that you believe in God?
Okay, so to be precise, well, like, for example, let me explain something. Buddha didn't believe in God. Buddha basically said the world just is what it is. He's kind of said there was like no God and that there was when he was asked. And other people just frame it as God or whatever. But apparently in Hinduism, to love yourself is to love God. As it turns out, it's like not really different. To answer your question, I would say this. I would say if there's no justice, if there's no good, then we're all just like kind of fooling ourselves, and the world's doomed and nothing matters. And everything will collapse, and that everything will basically burn or whatever. And like the cheaters were right, actually. They were the smart ones.
So what you think there is justice? You're telling me that so. God, you're telling me that God sat with folded arms and watched the Holocaust? And then in the 1970s in Cambodia, and then a woman whose husband drugged her and had 75 men rape her while she slept. Do you think there's justice? I mean, like, there's just like not a lot of justice. I think that we look at the world through, like, we can't see it past our arm's reach if we think there's justice, because there's been like tremendous amount of injustices in this world. And the reason why I'm asking you whether or not, like what a world would look like without God was like one of the first things I thought about when I slowly started realizing that I was an atheist. And again, like, I'm open to evidence of God. Like, I'm not trying to dismiss what you're saying in any way. I would be open to hearing it all, or any spiritual person, and trying to like make sense of it. But one of the first things I asked myself was like, what would be the difference in this world if there was no God? And to me, it feels like it would be the exact same. So there's no God. That's one thing. And then I think that there's this, like you were saying, that our consciousness goes on. I think it's like we've all grappled with our ego. It is really, I mean, like it is almost on a nightly basis. I think like, and I'm a bit of a nihilist. Like, I don't think anything matters. I don't think like, I think in the short term, I can make my life matter, but I don't think long term anything matters. Like, we're all going to die. The sun will burn out. Even if we extend our lives with like some of the new research we're doing, eventually the sun's going to burn out. Our solar system is expanding at it's faster than the speed of light. We're never going to get to a point, I don't think, of being interstellar where we could colonize a new planet. And I just think like it's an ego problem. We're so intelligent and we're so self-aware that we're aware of like the thought of not existing is fucking terrible. It's a torturous thought. And I feel like we're petting ourselves, our egos, when we stretch our imagination to think that there's something that's going to go on past us. And I just don't think that's going to happen. I just think we're going to cease to exist. And I think we die multiple deaths. Our first death is our own. Our second death is anyone who knew us. And then the third death is when humanity is eventually, this is becoming very negative, but humanity eventually is wiped out. Because like, I think like in the same sense of like why we haven't been contacted by other species or aliens or anything, like our universe is so vast. I'm sure there's like something alive out there, but the distance is so wide, number one problem, and the timing may not be right. If the universe has been around for 13.8 billion years, an intelligent life may have formed past like a sludgy amoeba colony of cells, may have formed, but may have never become interstellar and killed itself off and used all of its resources before it become interstellar. Maybe someone did become interstellar, but it's going to take like 100,000 light years to get here and they just don't have the technology. I mean, there's like so many variables. Like, why haven't we been visited? Maybe we have, I don't know. But like, I think in that same sense, we're just another life form that is formed on a planet that happens to be warm enough at a certain period of time. And we've been born in this very beautiful time where we have technology and comforts, when the most of us have evolved in like very hunter-gatherer survival lives. And now we are grappling with our ego. Sorry, I just got very nihilistic there, but like, I just think it's a big ego problem.
So there's a bunch of things we're talking about here, but let me address the first points, which, by the way, I actually asked as well, but it still boils down to the same question, which is there an afterlife? Or more precisely, do you have recurring lives after death? Or are there future past lives where you're accountable for whatever you did and whatever your karma is, which is a little bit different from being accountable, actually. It's just subtlety there that people don't understand. And the future. It all really boils down to that, because with the Holocaust, I will ask, by the way, on the podcast, someone the same damn thing. I'll say, where the fuck is justice for these situations? Now, I've actually looked in history to see, is there justice in these various situations? And there actually is quite a bit, as it turns out. For the Holocaust, I don't fucking know, but the idea is that basically whatever's done at some point is kind of like a downswing, right? Like in the case of in the Holocaust, it's like either a massive downswing or it's the result of like an upswing. Now, like a massive upswing to a massive downswing. It's hard to disprove that if like there's future and past lives or whatever. I can give you another example where there was some kind of justice. I can give you other examples. So like the death of Caesar, for example, like Caesar was hunted down and conspired against, but eventually the people that hunted him down were chased down and conspired against too. And like even if you look through Roman history, there's loads of examples of this. Actually, by the way, Roman history mirrors American history in many ways, but it's a bit more fucked up. As far as, I can give you another example, actually. I was wondering personally where all the justice was for the Indians who were brutally killed by the Americans, but it turns out that the history of the Indians was kind of similar to how the history of the Americans was to the Indians. That is, the Indians often were like basically did the same fucking thing to each other prior to the Americans coming over and like just totally wiping them out. Now, I can't answer every single question because it'd be impossible to answer all these questions, but I can tell you that there's a lot of evidences of these kinds of justices happening. You can look also at You can look also very various forms of greed. It's hard to know 100% that there's justice for all of them, but at some point it gets to this point of like you realize that there will never be an end to these kinds of questions, but you can see that it exists, and you can also see. Let me see if I can answer the case for the greed. Like we did talk about how cheating was a game that just was doomed to fail, and right. And there's a bit of a related concept in this that is important, where basically if you view cheating as this life strategy in order to win, the only way this can win is if there's a finite point where like you basically won, where there's no like life continues on afterwards. And so that's why I asked this question. I can't figure this out myself. Are there consecutive lives after? That's really the big question for me, because if there are, then it seems to me that everything will kind of equal out at some point. So yeah, in the case of cheating, this strategy will eventually backfire in some kind of way where people are like, this fucking sucks for everyone else, and we have to figure out a way to like appropriately punish these motherfuckers, or else it fucks us all. Like that event has to happen at some point. And the point that I'm making with that is that I really want to get at is actually there's loads of evidence that these religions are essentially right. It takes a bit of a deep introspection and looking into history, and actually can see quite some things that can be interpreted as miracles. 1 second.
I will argue against that. Because
1 second.
Yeah.
I just turned something on accident. But okay, so
have you seen Richard? Just real quick about the miracles. Have you seen Richard Dawkins? He has a video, like a multiple series. He's an evolutionary biologist, also an agnostic one. And he does a series on miracles and following miracles and trying to find evidence of these miracles. And he goes to places around the world where people say there are miracles happening, and he debunks them all. There's I've never seen evidence of a miracle. I don't believe there are miracles. I think there are stories of miracles, but
there's no true miracles in the sense that they deviate from the laws of physics. There will always be an explanation according to the laws of physics. Because
next you're going to tell me that someone was born of a virgin.
I don't know how that works, but I will say that, like, if you were looking for a scientific explanation for something, you're going to find it, because that's the way things work. But I mean, even with justice, like, I think it's a human construct. I don't think like primates are going out there and like finding justice for things. It's just like, I don't think it's right. From a deity, right? But
I feel like
This is a matter of perspective at every point. I'm telling you that this concept of deity and this concept of existence are like they're interlinked. That's the thing that we have to remember. Yeah, you can say this concept of justice is a human concept, but the reason why it exists is it's the inevitability of evolution that we get to this point where we're so advanced and we see, wait a second, killing each other and doing all these fucked up things to each other is the worst way of living than having this sense of justice. The ideal of that is a higher virtue. It's meaning that to have a society that exists in this way is a better way to live. It's a better experience. And that's kind of the point that I'm making here, is that if you think things through to their final conclusion, the final conclusion is precisely what the ancient sages, etc., have not exactly, they do predict to some degree. Christ predicted it. But they, at least, what do you say? They preached it in order for the world to look like this, for the sake of everyone's benefit. Do you see what I'm saying? It's like a real thing, a hypothetical reality. It doesn't need a religion to believe in it.
Yeah, I think like if you're going to tell me this very loose version, very cherry-picked version of religion and say, oh, like Jesus was just this socialist hippie and everyone would be so happy if we followed that, I would be like, okay, well, like this is such a loose version that it doesn't even like make sense to believe in anything again, because like there's no like equation or formula for me to follow, because you're taking out all of the misogyny, all of the anti-gay, all of the like repression of ideas that religion is known for. And you've just like cherry picked all the beautiful parts that you seem to like. That's what I'm hearing, because like religion has like done most of it has been like repressing of women up until lately. There's this like new Christianity that is less oppressive of women, but like even Muslim in Afghanistan, women in Afghanistan cannot show their faces or speak in public because the religion, you know, the true interpretation of that religion states that, and that's what they're doing. And like, and they're killing gay people and LGBTQ people because based off of this religion. I think if you're going to talk to me about this like loose interpretation of this like hippie, you know, God, then I mean, like I'd be down to hear it, but I don't think there's like much from traditional religion that you're pulling at this point. Like if you're saying ancient religions, I mean, I'd be down to hear that, but I don't think there's like a ton of evidence that points to like miracles or God. Or if I were a God, I wouldn't create a place where I can intervene and I don't. Like if you're talking about a God who has an entire universe, who has control over everything, who knows everyone, I would just be like, okay, like let's create a beautiful place for these humans to live. And like, oh my God, this woman is about to be, you know, raped by 50 guys. Like I want to stop that. Oh, the Holocaust? Why am I going to make a Hitler? I'm not creating a Hitler. I'm God. I'm not going to create Hitlers. But none of this, I feel like it's easy to just take, you know, this lighthearted, cherry-picked, beautiful side to things while ignoring, you know, what the reality is. Like, what would a universe look like with God? And I think a universe with God wouldn't include Hitler, wouldn't include, you know, poor people being robbed and cheated and living in impoverished and terrible lives and no access to water or healthcare. You know, like there's just a lot of things that I wouldn't do if I was God.
Well, there's a few things that we're missing here. First of all, you missed a couple of my points. Second of all, there's a lot to look. So it's hard to be at peace with all these things. So because it really, you know, there's the theory and there's bringing it into like how you actually make it work in the real world, especially when bad things do fucking happen. It's really quite a thing. I mean, this is, by the way, what enlightenment would truly be, is you internalize all this and you're just at peace with fucking everything, which is a state that virtually no one has achieved. As far as like all the bad things from religion, so there's really a long answer to that. For example, in the case of the Muslim religion and the misogyny, it varies per religion, right?
It's Christian too. I'm sorry. It's all religions. Yeah.
We're going to have to try not to interrupt each other. So,
okay.
The only one, so for the Muslim one, there's specifically I forget the name of the city, but there's a specific council, the Byzantine, like a Byzantine meeting of the Byzantines or something like that, where like the veil, which is the covering of the women's, was now enforced and all that. And if you look at things from their perspective, you can see why this sort of extremity might have seemed like a good idea. It clearly isn't really. It's kind of like the equivalent of your parents telling you, oh, you can't go play with boys or something like that, which they may mean well, but it's not really the right way of doing things. As for Christianity, most of Christianity is not particular. Like if you look at least the New Testament, it's not particularly bad towards women. And I think, I'm not a super expert on this stuff. It's really once you get into the like more like fundamental stuff, the more like extra traditional stuff where that sort of stuff crops up. And on the larger picture, so two other things. One, when we're talking about religion, all that I personally profess is, and this is the original idea in the past, even with Christianity, but also with Hinduism, by the way, and Buddhism. There's three major ones, and technically, by extension, Islam, which is an offshoot of Christianity, and Judaism. But basically that the idea is like the logical best solution is essentially what's supposed to be best on the whole. And so, fuck if like it makes you feel good to not care about these ancient like fucking traditions, don't fucking follow them. And really all I would say is whatever's logically the best for the collective, that's a uniting of like what's good for everybody. And that's really what a uniting of like, I want to say, I don't want to use this religion word, but a true religion will unite with logic totally, 100%. And this is, by the way, the realization I came to when I was about 17 or 15, that it was reawakened when I was 29, when I realized that literally, the first thought anyway, was that Christ literally died so that the world might be saved. That's just a fact based on his actions. It's not a religious interpretation. That's just some batshit insane thing that he did. He lived and died so that the world might be saved. You can just look at it logically. That's what it was like, wait a second, there's something here. And it actually led to like this crazy fucking altered state that was not drugs induced by my own, in my own mind. It led to the creation of the podcast, by the way. So, and the second thing is you say like, oh, if I was God, I would, remove all the bad things, blah, 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 blah. And, I can feel with that. But the idea is in fact that God does remove all the bad things, and that which is good, this concept of paradise would not exist without all these terrible things existing in the first place. And actually, you don't want to simply exist in paradise, because had you just existed in paradise, you would not really feel anything. It wouldn't feel that great because your new normal would just be paradise. It's like now we live in fucking first world. We're still fucking miserable because we see all the things that we don't have. It's the same kind of concept of sorts. Whereas if you don't get into this pattern of thinking, oh, what don't I have, etc., now all of a sudden maybe everything becomes a positive if you have the right kind of mindset. And by the way, the religions do preach that too, over and over, and all of them. They all say this in one way or another. They say that your mind is what dictates whether you're in heaven or in hell, and that the true view is actually to view things from the positive perspective only, ideally, and not really like the true good person sees only the positive somehow, which is fucking hard, obviously, but like this is like kind of like the equivalent of GTO in poker. And it's like a very hard thing to come by. And anyway, the idea, by the way, of all these bad things is God is actually, in theory, taking care of them. It's the idea that we are God collectively, and we're fucking doing something about this poverty, etc., and that problems are collectively solved over time. That's the theme. That is like, and I don't know if there's like mystic energy or what the fuck. I mean, something that's working that's beyond our current understanding, that I don't know. But that's the premise. It's like that it's literally, we're doing something about it. We see this is fucked up and it sucks. We're doing something about it. And we're like that way. We like this idea of a higher power and ourselves and our consciousness is one. Does that make any kind of sense?
Mm-hmm. I did not anticipate coming onto this podcast and having a religious discussion with you, Jungle, but I do. One of the things you resonated with me that you said, and I was thinking about this, like, I think today, was like you said, we're in the first world and we're like miserable all the time. And it is hard to just like chronically be grateful, and that does help. But like, it seems like people that it's like we come full circle. People who become like really rich tend to try to buy, experiences that us like, well, not, I mean, you and I are probably not in the same circles. I'm like I'm a middle class person, but like experiences that like poor and middle class people get, you know what I mean? Like there's a poker player who I know has good money, family money or whatever. And this person was like tweeting about like that. Yeah, I'm thinking about like trying to work at Starbucks for a month just to get an experience. I'm like, I have to work, minimum wage jobs to like pay rent when I was younger going to college. Like, cool. I'm glad you're getting a good experience, but like, I still think it's a good experience because you have to like learn maybe a bit of humility, maybe how to talk to people, or maybe how like people treat, low wage workers. I don't know how much Starbucks people make. I don't want to insult anyone, but yeah, it's like the first world, the comfort, the euphoric experience is just not enough. It doesn't scratch our itch. And I don't know why that is. I don't know if we were just like hunters and gatherers for so long, like living with this like high cortisol level, and we were, like we're not running away from lions enough these days. I don't know what it is, but it seems like people just like people want experiences that make them feel something.
So, okay, so like this is what the Buddha saw, by the way. He saw, this is my interpretation. He saw that people were perpetually chasing, right? And like your idea of like a good experience is what it happens in the nature of the universe is going from point A to point B. This is what creates the experience. It's like if you have a change in velocity, you're going to feel it. If there's some kind of change that happens, and that's what creates an emotion. It's really a form of emotion. And these people who are rich or whatever will keep chasing another experience and chasing another experience, etc. And it's like they view happiness as like getting to this point B constantly, then they're constantly chasing, right? And if they don't see and get more at peace with this idea, both of being at this point A and point B, well, actually, he had a different solution. He decided, fuck all this, we're going to exit it. But this is the principle of Hinduism, is to basically live in the world and be equanimous of what happens. So this idea is like you have to be at peace with both like a bit of suffering and also with the experience, and kind of view things as like a whole system of play. Like nothing really matters. Now, remember, I'm not a qualified spiritual teacher. This is just my logical interpretation of things. But looking at things through this lens, you can see like if your reality is always like a constant thing, the only way to feel something is by changing your reality. But if your reality like fucking sucked in the first place, it's actually a better situation in a way, because if there's way more potential, now you can feel better and better and better, versus someone who like starts high and is like stuck to the point of like, oh fuck, like a Ferrari doesn't even make me happy. Holy shit. Like I have to get another car. I need to get Bugatti. Now I'm happy. And like, fuck, Bugatti doesn't make me happy. Fuck, what do I do now? And you're like, and then they're stuck in like a yacht or something. And then they realize, fuck, I don't know. Shit, I need like 1,000 women or something. I presume this is Dan Bilzerian's problem, or was. And it's like, shit, I don't know what to do now.
When I interviewed him, he was happy in a relationship. Let me ask you a question, and I feel like this may be at the tail end of what we're talking about, and like humor me now and try to understand my perspective, right? So like from my perspective, I feel like a lot of this is derived from ego, and we have ego problems because we know we're going to die, and it's hard to grasp with that. But I don't know if you've seen, like, there have been some studies done on rats, and now like some dogs have, they've done this treatment on dogs where it rejuvenates rats, like it reverses aging. And I don't think we'll ever get to a place where we don't die, but I think we can get to a place where we live for maybe a couple 100 years or 300 years. And I feel like we're at the tail end of the last generation to die, or die below 100 years. And it is one thing I think about, like, I think the billionaires will stop dying first. That will be the first, for me, like, sign that, oh, they've solved aging. But when it starts happening, I not only do I think like I feel like a lot of religious teachings have been around to help us cope with parts of our lives that are difficult. Like in Christianity, your misery is like, if you're miserable in your life, you will be rewarded in the afterlife, kind of thing. Your suffering will be rewarded, those kinds of thoughts. But like now we're at the tail end of potentially not dying. And then we have, like, it is just a weird concept for me to think that, like, I'm probably going to die, but like maybe the Gen Zers or the Gen Alpha are not, or have the option to not die. And then like how close we were to that. I'm just wondering what you think, like, if religious teachings are going to change when that happens, and like the ethics. I think, like, is there going to be a birth lottery? Is there, like, how are we going to adjust to people not dying? Like, will murder be even worse because the person had like 300 years of potential?
So a couple things. Firstly, I think that there's fates worse than death for sure. Like, you can get you can have a miserable life for a really long time. Like, that's worse than death. So there's that. One thing also about the religions that people don't really understand is when these guys were preaching to the populations at these various times, you have to take into account the geography and also the culture of the people and all that stuff, and like where they're at, like emotionally and that sort of thing. So, for example, it's impossible to preach a theoretical ideal to someone to a society that doesn't give a fuck. You actually might like to make it a little bit easier to follow. And then once they get to that point, say, oh, well, actually, there's some more rules that we can get to a higher place. And that would be a more effective strategy, which, by the way, there are some evidences of this going on in the world today. And now, like, even the spiritual teachings of sorts have evolved, and people have gotten to this point of pure reason, or actually I just wrote about this, of like full like extent of their reason, where they become atheists or whatever, and they realize, wait, there's no fucking miracles, like blah blah blah, like, why is all this bad shit going on? A lot of people think like that, and where they have to now use a reason, not what some fucking weird dude from the desert came and said, oh, these are the laws and God talked to me, and use their own reason to decide what's good and what's not. And to the point where, like I said, like, now appears to be a time where reason and these spiritual practices can unite, and there's no more need for just these fucking ridiculous assertions. Actually, we were just talking about this, by the way, and if you think about it, you were just talking about how most people operate from this place of groupthink, etc. Now think about if you were trying to teach a lesson, to teach society to be good, how would you do that? If like people are not following reason and they're following something else, you would authoritatively speak like, this is the law, like blah blah blah, you have to do this, and you wouldn't say and you have to make these like fucking rigid rules, or else people would say or not really follow them. And so that's kind of what like Moses did, and like the first ones did something like that, is to create some kind of people that follow them. But of course, that's not like the ultimate long-term strategy if we're talking about really, disregarding like emotionally manipulative tactics, and really getting into the truth of things if you really want to ask all these questions, right? So it makes sense for them to do that, is my point, in order to move society in the right direction, or in a direction that's better than whatever bunch of chaos. And my opinion with the 300 rule thing, 300 year thing, I don't really know what's going to happen, honestly. I think that we're probably not going to be able to solve death at all, is my guess. But I think things will extend for longer and longer, and I think the afterlife will become this life, essentially, right? If we can be young, like, do we really want to be really old and last for 300 years? I'm not so sure. I'm going to be like, oh, well, actually, being young again doesn't sound that bad.
I don't want to shit my pants in a diaper for 200 years.
Yeah, that doesn't sound ideal.
I don't want to be decrepit. That's what I say.
You might think, like, never mind. Fuck this, eternal life shit.
Yeah, I will say, like, as a nurse who's seen quality of life go downhill, I agree with you that, like, there are worse things sometimes than dying. And I think, like, a high quality of life is like the ultimate goal. It's better, I think, to have 100 years of high quality life than 300 years of decrepit, some sort of like lingering, or whatever that would look like. You made me feel better. We're all going to die.
If you're very curious, you can play a video game called Sekiro, which is a tough game, but it's pretty cool, where a bunch of people figure out ways to have as long a life as possible, and they all get really creepy and fucked up, basically. And the ninja dude mostly just kills them all and like fights a dragon and all that kind of stuff. So that might help entertain your curiosity.
Yeah, it sounds like it's right up my wheelhouse.
There you go.
I want to ask you one question. I don't know when you're planning on ending this, but do you think that, like, going back to soon? Yeah, because you need your sleep
at some point. And then I need to play poker and at some point sleep.
Okay, you go play poker. We don't need to get more into this. It's fine. You can go play poker.
We can do one more question, and then I can go play poker.
I just feel like this question is going to be a little bit of a long answer, but like, you were talking about Moses, like how it was like more authoritarian and stuff. I think that as humans, we've evolved to have to socially work with each other. It's how we've, formed communities and towns, and economies. And like, it doesn't help you to like go on a murderous rampage. It
It's
only
not
like will
ideal.
hurt you and your, yeah, it's not ideal. Like it'll hurt you in more ways than like, yeah. Anyway, do you think humans are naturally like are not rule followers or not like wanting to do good things for each other without a God?
Well, the God is essentially that's what it's within us. That's the theme of sorts. It's not different ultimately, and actually, most of human nature was violent. And one real evidence of God, by the way, is we're progressively getting not less violent on the whole, and things are generally getting in the better and better direction. But this is actually the course of evolution happening. I can't tell you precisely, as I'm not an evolutionary theorist, that clearly evolution is going in the positive direction, but it sure looks that way. It sure looks as though, and this is the argument that I personally think, is that evolution is going to lead essentially to what we know as Christ consciousness, which is basically everyone just behaves like Christ. But yeah, we'll see about that. That's pretty big. What's the word? Guess as to what will happen. I don't know that it will, but it sure does look like that's the next stage of evolution. I don't want to, I haven't read as much as these fucking professors.
Let's hope natural selection runs that way. Let's hope. Speaking of which, I'm going to see Richard Dawkins on Thursday, so I'm pretty excited.
Oh, okay. I could read his book. I read Christopher Hudgens' book, by the way. Nothing he said.
Which one?
For the most, he actually made a few mistakes in what he was saying. I read precisely this book, God is Not Good, because I have to consider the counter arguments. But he said basically what I thought he would say. And really, there's a whole lot of stuff going on where definitely it's inefficient. I'm certainly not a fan of traditions getting in the way of doing what's right. I'm not a fan of that. I mean, I would think that that's making religions, etc., look bad, but it's also a bit presumptuous to diagnose all these problems before really looking at all the sides and stuff like that to see if it's like pure stupidity or greed that's really holding things back. In which case, by the way, all religions consider stupidity, greed, laziness, you name it, all those negative qualities, they consider those bad things. It's the same philosophies of sorts as you see in self-development. Hey, be a better person. It's the same. It actually takes it to a further extreme of saying like all these things are fucking bad, and just no one's really connected the dots. Is like to the point of like, okay, there's a self-help industry, and then there's the ancient whatever philosophies, and they're like ultra strict, where almost no one can follow them. But yeah, a little deep dive in history might surprise you. History's got lots of secrets, as it turns out. I think there was something else you asked about. What was that? Oh, and by the way, the Moses situation, Machiavelli writes about that, and he writes about how Moses had to be really authoritarian, or else people wouldn't have followed them, and there was a bunch of refugees essentially following them, and he had to like issue just like 10 simple rules to follow and be really like a conventionally like strong leader, or the whole thing would have fallen apart as a whole nation. There would have been no nation of Israelites if there was no authoritarian persona guiding them in the first place. But the Old Testament's fucking complicated, and I think there's evidence of that, the Old Testament not being as accurate as it's alleged to be. So there's that too.
I mean, I think you know how I feel. I think it was a book written by I think Stone Age peasants at that time, maybe the first. Oh, anyway, I'm a big fan of Christopher Hitchens and Richard Dawkins and Lawrence Krauss, and yeah, I probably derived a lot of my logical thinking around religion from them. So yeah, I haven't. Yeah.
I was going to say a lot of what Christopher Hitchens says, I actually agree with. I actually agree with certain virtues that he exhibits, such as non-judgmentality. This is a virtue preached by most old religions. It's only when they get too fundamentalist, to get too ridiculous in their beliefs, that this becomes an issue. Like, he's right about that versus the old religions. Remember, what's logically the best is better than, in my opinion, why like listen to some precise thing from a book that we can deduce with our own conscious and logic what's good and what's not. That you can say is supposed to be what God is, actually, but you have to make it reality. Like, there's no need to like listen to precise dogma that someone said that's not even necessarily like, you know, like the right theologian or whatever, like some conversion of the book. Just really just follow their own logic. That's kind of the old underlying principle between a lot of these things, including Hinduism, by the way, Buddhism more obviously, and actually Christianity until about the 1800s, to my knowledge. In which case, you know, the thinking people came along and said, well, what about communism or whatever?
I know that you have to go play poker, but I will say that like the way you think about religion is probably not reflective of like most religious people in America.
Right. Well, to find the real truth is real complicated, and yeah, like we said, for what's optimal for each person is going to depend on where they are, at least in the short term, right? It looks like I've got to go also, so
okay.
I'm going to call them now. But
all right.
So if you want
thanks
the real
for having
truth,
me.
Yeah, well, thanks for your time as well. If you want the real truth, you have to do some digging and you go search for it. This is what the Hindus did, and they did way more sadhana than practices than any of us fucking did. That's for sure. If you go read it, they're like really insane. Oh, and another thing I'd like to remind you that I personally think, and I had actually an ayahuasca trip about this, was that this concept of miracles, you can dismiss anything away as just some scientific explanation, but it's like it seemed as though the miracles were really a matter of like looking at the patterns in your emotional states versus looking at like whether it followed science or not. Like everything has to follow science. That's how the universe works. There's a science. There has to be laws in order for the universe to work. Yeah, so that was a big thing for me. So I had a precise ayahuasca trip about that made me realize, okay, like, I guess there are miracles, not just being an idiot. All right, so I've got to go.
Yeah, I don't want to. Okay, you go. I don't want to keep going with this because I know you have to go. But thank you so much. And honestly, like, I know we had a little bit of a head butting there, but like, I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate you having me on and having a candid discussion. And I hope to see you one of these days at Hustler, and maybe we can grab a coffee or something and chat, or at least go upstairs and chat for a bit, because it was like you're a lot more interesting and wonderful to talk to than I thought. So thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.